happiness is a choice, as I said. So like, choose to be happy. If you could choose anything in this world, why not choose happy?
Nothing like stars from a paradise. Don't care, cause there's magic in the air tonight. Pretty girl in my ear, she the rarest type. Heaven on earth is right here tonight. I'm in the dream state. I'm in the dream state.
There is a reason the four people in this room are sitting here together right now. There is a higher reason than what we see on the surface. I cannot wait to find it out. We're going to find it out years down the road. But tonight, the reason we are here is to tell such an important story, to talk about some things that are really important. This podcast episode has been on the schedule for a while. I've been so excited to get into it. We have the legend, Luke Natale, a.k.a. Swagger Boy Luke. How we doing, brother?
Red, thank you so much for having me, man. This has been a long time in the works and a long time coming. So grateful to be here, man. So excited. The way that our friendship has grown in this year, the Jordan year, 2023, honestly, you can't beat it. If there was another way, Red, there would be.
Listen, if there was another way, there would be. There is not. There is no other way. Yeah, I mean, the timing of when we all became friends, you, myself, Jason Keats, you know, it was right at the end of Reds, when Reds had just closed. And I always say it, you know, that timing of when we all became friends and the energy that was brought together, I truly believe that there is a higher reason than just what we see on the surface. And obviously, all our energies, I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, when we're all together, it's just amazing. And, you know, I come to find out about the Happiness Review, which is your movement and something we're going to dive deep into today. But, you know, prior to that and prior to when I met you, you know, just this year, I don't know the story. So it's something that I've really been looking forward to getting into and learning about. So, you know, obviously Reds closes. That's where our era begins. We all become friends. Prior to that, I don't really know much. So if you want to fill us in a little bit, and then we could go from there.
No, absolutely. And it's honestly, it's a crazy story. And I hate using the word crazy because like people think it's cliche and stuff like that. But like, bro, everything happens for a reason, right? And Jay reached out to me on Instagram prior to me moving back to New Jersey because I was actually living in North Carolina for a little bit, which I'll dive into. But he was like, yo, you got to check this kid Red out. Like, he's just got this electric energy, and you and him would 100% just light a room up together. And I was like, dude, let me see it. So he sends me the video of you in Hawaii in the UFC gym just ripping. And, like, I knew it right then and there. I was like, this guy's just got something a little different that most people don't have. And I knew that we would definitely connect. So as soon as we met, bro, it was like, it was on site. Like, we were just dialed in. The boys were absolutely buzzing. And I knew, I was like, this is my guy. But, you know, going back to that time period, like you were saying, I missed the Reds era because I was living in North Carolina. Going back to North Carolina, it was like I was in a relationship at the time. I took a dive to move with this girl that I was seeing. And basically, North Carolina, pre-COVID, was in this space where they had this huge tech boom, right? So all these tech companies, like they kind of had in San Francisco, were popping off. And they were all opening up their new headquarters. And it was number 3 in the country for average starting income versus average cost of living. So I'm like finishing school online. This is like 2019. And I'm like, yo, why would I not start my career in a place where I'm going to make more money and pay less for the cost of living? So I end up taking the dive and moving out to North Carolina 3 days before the COVID shutdown goes national.
No fucking way.
So I moved to a complete new state where I have no friends, family, or really anything besides, you know, this person I'm in a relationship with and her family and friends, and everything shuts down completely. The company that I had a job with, they pivot and get rid of the office entirely, hire nationally, and go fully remote. So now I'm confined to a 1-bedroom apartment every day in a place I've never been before in my life. Never been there. And so it was like the wildest time to pick up a new life and try to meet people when everything's at an arm's length. Nobody wants to talk. Everyone's got masks on. There were so many different things going on. And it was just a crazy, crazy space to be in. So I'm in this spot where it's like, okay, I'm working remotely. I don't have really any leadership or anybody to report to on a daily basis. I don't have anybody to like bounce back and forth with and build that chemistry and camaraderie with like your coworkers. So I ended up just kind of getting into this space where I'm like mentally declining. Like, relationships are so important, man. Your friends, your family, the people that you talk to on a daily basis, your coworkers, all of that is one of the most important things that we have in this world. Like, if you are completely isolated, the only thing that you have is your own mind, and your mind has this ability to just run and run, especially when you're like me. They say you have 60,000 thoughts a day. I have 160,000 thoughts a day, bro. Like, my mind just runs. So I'm in this space where it's like, yo, one, I'm selling healthcare tech to pediatrics during COVID. So it's like, that's mentally draining. All of the stuff, like losing the relationships with friends, family, not that I wasn't able to hop on a phone call, but life goes on, things change, and people get into their day-to-days. And for me, I just started like really feeling like I needed something different, right? And so I started just kind of like digging deep into myself. I started like, honestly, like looking for places that I could have someone to talk to that was just like non-biased, right? Because like, what am I gonna like complain about like relationship issues to like my girlfriend's mom and dad? Like, no, like that's not the way to do it. I don't want to like talk to my homie that I haven't talked to in a while and then like tell him X, Y, and Z about that's negative. I want to get the boys going. I want to talk to my friend and just like, yo, what's good in life right now, So I started looking into like BetterHelp, which is like online therapy that you can do virtually, but I'm not really enjoying this whole like virtual connection thing where it's like as soon as the screen shuts off, there's no energy. Like you and I are sitting next to each other right now. Like I feel your presence. I know you're here. But when you have that screen in between you, you can do it if you know each other. Like if we hop on a FaceTime, yeah, that's cool. But I know you already. I already know your energy. So through work, that wasn't working for me. Going into therapy, it wasn't working for me. And then I started trying to do in-person therapy because I just wanted like a place to go, man. And they throw me on a 6-month waiting list. So I'm like, yo, like 6 months. Like what if I was having a mental health crisis today, right now? And luckily I wasn't at that point. Like I wasn't going nuts, but I just knew I needed to, fix things up and get myself a little bit more mentally clear. And at that time when that happened and they threw this 6-month waiting list on me, I'm like, there has to be a better way. There has to be something somewhere that people can go to and be like, hey, I'm not so far. I'm grateful that we have the suicide hotline, right? But I'm not that far down the line that I feel like I need to call that. And also, I don't want to take away from somebody who might be trying to call in that does have that emergency going on. So I started digging deeper and deeper, and I'm like, there's really like not just like a mental health hotline, like a place that you can just call, chat with somebody, and get that like off of your chest, right? So then that kind of just led me down a path of like, what could I do or what could I create that would be something that people could do for free? Because also, that's another thing with therapy. You got to have insurance or it's very, very expensive.
It's tough.
It's hard to get in there, right? So I'm like, what do we do that just like naturally supports us, right? Like you brush your teeth, you take vitamins, you do these things that are like daily routine that you almost don't even think about. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of like where I started and where I started like building out this idea. I started writing a book, honestly. Because I was just like, yo, like I need somewhere to put this energy that I'm feeling inside of me out that's just non-biased. That's just a place that's safe and I could just let it go. So I'm writing this book and the concept of the book is to be 66 short digestible chapters that you can read in a day. The reason for 66 is because that's what it takes to create a sustainable habit that will stick. So 66 short chapters. Every chapter I started incorporating like some of the stuff's pretty deep, pretty heavy. Like it gets into like my past, traumas, different kind of things like that. And I'm like, I don't want to make somebody go to a dark place from reading this. So I'm like, what could I do to kind of like negate that? So I started adding in 2 journal questions at the end, just kind of like, I was calling them a pulse check. And pulse check was kind of like this thing that started clicking for me where I'm like, okay, like checking the pulse of the room. And then all of a sudden it just clicked. And I'm like, what if I also put in a happiness review? So on a scale of 1 to 10 with decimals included, where's your happiness at on a daily basis? And so it's kind of like brushing your teeth or taking your vitamins, where it's this thing that's like, it's easy to do. If you miss 1 or 2 times a day, if you go to bed and you don't brush your teeth, it's not like your teeth are going to fall out of your head, right? But you do it as a preventative measure so that over time, your mouth is healthy, your teeth are healthy. And if you miss that one night where you were, whatever, it just didn't happen for you, you didn't brush your teeth, you still have a level of like preventative that you took for your teeth and your health. So then when I started putting all that down, I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, I like this. So I started recording mine like 2 to 3 times a day, just kind of where you're at. And over time, I started noticing this like accountability of like, I don't want to have a 3.2. Like, I want to be a 9.5 all day. I want to be a 10. Like, but I also understood that not every day is going to be a 10, right? Especially coming from a place where I wasn't the happiest I've ever been in my life. So I'm like, all right, like that comes into a space for me where I'm like, I understand that there always has to be like an equal and opposite for everything. And like, I'm very spiritual. I very much so believe in like the laws of the universe. Like, it's like gravity. What goes up must come down. Like, there's always going to be an equal and opposite reaction to everything. So in order to experience a 10, you have to have a 1. You have to know what the lowest low is like. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know what a 10 was. You wouldn't even know what the best feeling ever was. So that's where it really started to get granular with the decimals and adding in these different things. And from there, shout out my boy Devin. I'm drinking Dev's special stuff right here, little pro mix action.
Let's fucking
go. I hopped on a call with my buddy Devin LeVake. I don't know if you know him, but he actually bear crawled the New York Marathon, which is insane, 26.2 miles on his hands and feet. Raised $1 million for mental health awareness. Like, absolute legend, bro. Shout out Dev. I hop on this call with Dev and I'm talking to him and like, we kind of went through everything. Like, we're vibing. Dev's one of the boys. Like, he's the man, you know? And he was like, stops me dead in my tracks as I'm telling him about the book and I say the happiness review. And he was like, yo, stop right there. He's like, what is that? Like, what's the happiness review? Tell me more about that. So I just go through the whole thing I just told you, go through the whole scale. And he's like, yo, trademark that. Like, right now, like, you got to do it. Now, mind you, I'm in this space where it's like, things are weird with work. Things are weird with my living situation. Things are weird with my friends and family because I'm far away from everyone. Now, all of a sudden, this dude who's so successful, that's just a ball of energy, is like the first person in a while who just straight up believed in me and was like, that idea is so sick, man. Like, you got to run with that. And from there, I just started like really believing in it, really diving deeper. Then I finally got into a situation where I actually was able to work with a therapist, brought it to them, and the feedback was just constantly positive at the beginning. Not that it's bad now, but it's just high level positivity. And it just became something bigger than like I was even thinking it would be. It became my entire brand. And it's crazy because it's one small piece of a bigger picture. So I already said, like, I'm building out the book. I'm writing the book. As you can see, got the shirt on. You've been repping the clothes. I've been seeing it on the pod, and I love that. I'm so grateful for that. But, like, that's all small pieces that are going to be this bigger picture. Because I genuinely believe that people don't really care as much as you think they do. They have things that they see, like people will be like, oh, I saw you were in Miami, blah, blah, blah. But like, I was in Miami like 3 months ago or whatever, but they saw that and that's what they remember from Instagram. So you got to like kind of chip away at things. And then over time, as you're consistent, now you have some clothing, you have some content that you put out. Later on, once this is already built and I have brand recognition and then I put a book out, now it's like, okay, I've got your attention and there's actually a reason to like put the book out. So that's really like the base level of this, of where it all started, where it came from. And then shooting things forward to kind of pick up where you left off. Relationship goes south. I was changing, growing apart, and it just came to a head where it was like everything that I've got going on, the stuff that's starting to grow with the happiness review, it all leads me back home. That's where all my support system is. That's where everybody who helps me with content, video, shout out Danny Drew, Frank Bonilla, Parker Russo, like those guys really took off for me. And like, you know, Danny built out the designs for me. Like I needed to be here. Otherwise, like there, it was just so difficult to connect with everybody consistently and really get it going. So relationship comes to a head. Everything ends. We end up splitting up. I come back home like 4th of July weekend, 2022. And just literally it was like if COVID was a video game and you press pause and then you press play again, but I had this like work experience and I had this brand. And now all of a sudden I'm like injected back into life because like life paused here. You know how it was. And now I'm back. I started working a headliner again. And I started being around these people that I was with my whole life. All my relationships started coming back. And that's where things started to grow and started to build. That's when Jay was like, yo, in person, like, we got to meet Red. Comes together. We end up meeting. Flash forward to now. And it's like, I couldn't picture a better moment to like, one, kind of like really start to put my story out there. Because like I put out some content and I have some stuff that I'm still working on. But like to be able to tell it on your platform, to be able to talk to somebody that like I've really become genuinely close with, that we're in group chat talking every day. We talk on Instagram. We hang out when we go out to the bars. Like this is the place to be right now.
The Reddcast.
The Reddcast.
This is where the story gets told. First of all, I want to say, listening to that entire story, I am fired the fuck up right now.
Fire me up.
Like, the blood is just absolutely flowing right now. Listen, you said so many good points within there. That origin story is something I had no clue about. When you're down in North Carolina, one of the questions that came up while you were saying that, when you first started those reviews, the happiness review, which was, it's crazy, your word crazy, to hear that it started almost as a journal entry in this book you were writing. Like, I need to add a happiness review. Me knowing it now, what it is and what you're trying to build, hearing it at that point is just insane to me. Like that, imagine taking just an idea, something that you felt that you needed to do, and now creating an entire movement off of that. That to me is one of the coolest things in the world, that we're able to do that in this day and age. And it was amazing to hear that. But when you started those reviews, what would you say your average happiness score was?
Honestly, man, it was definitely low. You know, I think also when you dig into things like your past trauma, listen, it's important, but it's hard. It's hard to bring things up from the past. I always have like, I'm a huge analogy guy, right? I always have this analogy of like, when you sweep things under the rug, it doesn't actually clean anything up. It just grows a nastier, more infested mess. And then when you go back in later on to go clean that mess, it's even dirtier, it's moldier, it's even harder to get through it. So I was like doing my own therapy session essentially by writing this book. And it was taking me like down some dark paths of just like things that have been suppressed into my, you know, it's in your subconscious and it comes out in moments of like, you know, I used to have a lot of like verbal and physical abuse within like one of my family relationships. And then when you get into an argument with somebody and you're around someone who would always just go for the jugular and go for that kill shot, when you argue with them, that becomes your style too. Because we're a product of our environment, right? Like, that's why your relationships are so important. That's why people say these things like, yo, show me the 5 people that you're around the most, and I'll show you what your future looks like. And it's because we, as people, like, monkey see, monkey do, man. Like, that's just how things happen. That's how we learn. That's how babies learn. That's how society works. And so as I'm realizing that, like, I don't like this about myself, like, I don't want to get into an argument and then all of a sudden, like, say the meanest thing I could possibly say about you. Because when you do that, you actually feel like shit. You feel worse. It doesn't make you any happier. You don't feel like a bigger man because you made somebody cry. You feel worse about yourself because now I feel like shit, which is the reason that I made you feel like shit. And now you do too. And now we have even more of a mess under the rug because you still didn't fix anything. You didn't dig in. You didn't get to it. So I would say score-wise, like, I had days where I was like a 3.2. I had days where I was like a 2.2. I'm a very emotional person, right? And I feel like emotionally, I've learned, my therapist, shout out Brian, my therapist, he's the man. He told me that he doesn't like diagnosis as much. He cares about quality of life, right? And so it's pretty clear that like somewhere within there, like I've kind of fallen onto like the spectrum of bipolar because my moods range very highly. But I've never been diagnosed as bipolar. But when you get into it and you see like when I'm happy, it's all the way up. And that gets reciprocated across other people. When I'm sad, it's the same way. And that goes across everything. And like at the time I would think to myself like, yo, am I bipolar? Like, is this thing? Like, do I have this like mental disorder? Am I, you know, like I was just starting to get even more down on myself. And then I got to this point where I was like, yo, I wouldn't change it for the world. Because I genuinely feel like I've loved harder, I've laughed harder, I've cared more than the average person. So I would keep this, whatever it is that goes on in my mind and having these racing thoughts forever. anything. I love it. I love that I'm an emotional person that genuinely feels their emotions. And so going through that dark time and that dark space, like, I'm grateful for it, man. I'm happy that it happened. I'm happy that I had those low scores. And I think as things come forward now, and as your relationships pick up and you start talking to people more again, you start having group chats going off, you start having different people's birthdays, experiences. Jason Keats, one of my best friends, big DJ, on the come up right now, starting to get some really big bookings. We've had some awesome shows. And like, bro, those moments completely resurrected my happiness on a daily basis. Like, I can't remember the last time I had a score below like a 7. Like, things are just phenomenal right now. Life is great right now. So, I mean, you got to have those lows. You got to, shout out 50 Cent. Sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain, dog. You got to have the rain, or you would, if every day was sunny, you wouldn't appreciate it, man.
That is such an important point, because I think when you're talking about mental health and you're talking about emotions and things like that, I think something that continues to come up in a lot of podcast episodes with everybody I talk to is you're going through emotions, and sometimes you're asking why. Like, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? What is the point? What am I going to learn here? And then you get to a point where you get past asking that question, why, and what you're feeling and what it's doing to you. And when you get to that point in the future where you look back and you're like, wait a second, now I know why. But you don't always see it in the moment. You can't always see what's going on or why something's going on until you get to a point in the future where you're like, okay, the reason I am where I am right now and the reason I'm going to get through it is because I went through that in the past. Now, I think you going through that whole chapter, North Carolina, all those things happening, all that emotional health, all those ups and downs, it brings you to a point of where now you have this movement, the Happiness Review, and out of all of that darkness came this light. And like you said, the sunny days wouldn't be so special if it wasn't for the rain.
100%. I'm a big believer on this, man, but you got to go through some shit to learn some shit. I just think it's important, man. Like, obviously nobody wants to have a difficult time in their life. Nobody wants to have a low score, but going through that stuff is always what makes you stronger, man. Like, you come out on the other side of it with a whole wealth of knowledge. And like, I want to say it to anybody that's listening right now, but definitely anybody who needs it. Like, there comes a point in your life where you just got to face things, because when you get through it, like, think about the hardest thing you've ever been through in your life. You've been through that. You've been through that moment, and here you are now. So when you're in that moment of like, damn, this is difficult, this is really tough, like, remember that. Remember that no matter how bad it ever got for you, you still made it through. You still got to another point in your life. You still got to live another day. And there always comes that other side. Like, that's where I love the Happiness Review for myself, and the idea that this scale, like, you got to have one to feel the other. Like, now, when I do get low, because there's still times where I've gotten low, but like, when I get into my head a little bit, I catch it very quickly, where I'm like, okay, this is hard right now. Today really sucked. There's a moment that's coming for me that I cannot wait to feel, man. You got to go through that shit to learn that shit, though.
It's so huge. I mean, that question of why, and then getting to the and I think what people in today's day, what we're going through now with social media and everything that's going on, it's hard for people to see when somebody's going through a tough time, which is why I really like the movement you have. And again, when we did the podcast, Jason and I wanted to make that point as well, because people are afraid to show when things aren't going great.
Yeah.
But I think I think people who are afraid to show that, and a lot of other people don't realize, is that everybody goes through that. Everybody is going to go through dark times, and even the people you think are so happy and have so much success and they've got all this stuff, those people are going through it. I guarantee, because what you realize is, it was going back to what you said, the ups and the downs. It happens constantly, especially when you're going after something that's so important to you. If you're trying to build something, a lot of the times when you're working towards something, it's a lonely road. You have your people around you, your close friends, but at the end of the day, you're the one putting in all the work. You're going through everything that's, coming your way in order to make what you want to happen. And when you're going through that, it's tough, because you're going to face so many lows, and then you're going to be up one day, and then you're going to be down. And I think what people need to realize is, no matter what, no matter who you are, you're always going to have the highs, and you're always going to have the lows. But there's a reason that you go through those lows, because like you said, you come down the road, down the line, and you're like, okay, wait a second. This is happening to me right now. but I went through something similar, and I know I could get through it because that happened and I made it through.
100%.
And then it got me back to this point, but I'm going to make it through this as well. And it's cool. The timing is so, insane to me, how the universe works and everything like that. Next week, and this episode is going to air in the future, but next week there's an episode airing with my good friend Dan Valerio.
Okay.
He was a pro ball player, really close friend of mine. Somebody who during that pandemic era, as we said in the episode, we hung out together almost every day. And we were able to work out through all that, and we were able to stay together. And then as time went on, you mentioned this before, kind of grew apart. Our friendship never changed, but it just went from hanging out and talking every day to not being able to hang out and talk every day. But something that he went through, it happened out of nowhere. He started having depression, he started having anxiety, and he was asking that question, why? And literally just going through that episode this week and then having us do the episode today, it kind of put me back in that mindset. And it kind of put me back into relating back to all those feelings that I felt when we were talking on that episode. And the one thing that he was saying was he couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And he's going to all these doctors and he's going to all these places and he's going to all these people and he's trying to figure out what is wrong. And he can't figure it out and no one can tell him, right? And it ends up for him, many people have many different ways in which they kind of rise above that darkness. And he found faith and he became extremely religious and he found his faith in God, and that helped get him through it. And it was crazy to hear his story because, again, trying so many different things and it's failing. That's another point, is when you get to those lows and you feel like you're stuck, you're probably going to be trying a lot of different ways to get out of it, or going to be searching for that answer. But what you got to realize is eventually you're going to land on it. And I think a lot of people get to that low point just like him, and they're stuck and they cannot find the answer. And it's a snowball effect. 100%. You just keep asking why, and then it keeps you down there, Yep. But then eventually it's going to click. And I think that's something important I want to drive in, is eventually you will find something that brings you back up. And you might find a few things here and there that bring you, back up for a short period of time. Maybe like you do, like he was saying, he was doing yoga and meditation, and that would help in that moment, right? But overall, he would always be brought back down because he couldn't find the answer. But then when he found his faith and everything, that was kind of the key. He heals and he feels a lot better. And then down the line, he gets hit with another piece of adversity, another thing in his life that just hits him hard. Yeah. And he goes, you know what? When I was going through all that, I remembered back to that time, and then I remembered back to the time where it was solved and I was okay. So now I'm back in that position, but I know I can make it through. And I think just the happiness review, as soon as you told me what this was, having a place to go talk to people is so important. And again, 100%. Going back to where people are, it's okay to show your emotions and talk about your emotions. And we harped on that on the first episode. Like Jason was talking about, he's like, listen, I'll cry. I'm a man. I'll cry. I'm not afraid to do that. And that is such an important point. Again, going back to everybody thinks everybody has it figured out. Nobody does. And everyone is going through something you can't see, but it's important to know that there's somebody you can go and talk to. And that's why I love this movement, because I think it's providing a platform where people can go when they're feeling like that, and maybe search for a few answers, or maybe search for something that will point them in the right direction. 100%.
And I think it's crazy to hear that story, because that is a lot of what I was going through. And I started really searching for different things. So the book was one part of it, but I was doing a lot of that stuff too. I started really getting deep into meditation. I listened to this guided meditation on the Calm app. It's amazing. It became a daily practice. I think kind of going into what you were saying, how it's things start to snowball, right? And if you're constantly thinking about everything's the worst right now, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this. I don't know how I'm ever going to get through what I'm going through right now. That's going to continue to become your reality, because it's what you're thinking about the most. And if you're into the spiritual side of things, you believe it, man. Thoughts become things. And for me, it all started for me going into the sauna, right? So finally, a turning point for me in North Carolina, things start to lighten up with the COVID restrictions a little bit. And I'm like, man, I need some interaction in my life again. So I just took a ride one day and I was like, where can I find a gym? I ended up coming across this gym that just had a bunch of people, peers, our age, smiling faces, no masks, working out. And I was like, this is it. Signed up for the gym right then and there that day. And they had a sauna in the locker room that is actually a chapter in my book. It's funny. I call it my dirty little sauna. This sauna, bro, literally smelled like a hockey bag. It was disgusting. There was nails coming out of the wall, everything. This thing was falling apart. And in that dirty little sauna, in that sketchy place, is where I literally found like the most important parts of my life. Listening to these guided meditations, and like for me, spiritually, like I believe in God, but I also think it's important to just believe that there's a higher power. Whatever your God is, whatever that is for you, like just understanding that something is pulling the strings. Like it always ends up working out in life. Everyone becomes something. Like think of every parent you ever met, like all of them have a job. Everyone ends up somewhere in their life. And so as I'm sitting in this dirty little sauna and I'm getting deeper and deeper into like listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, listening to these guided meditations, I started like picking up on things that work for me, right? And so at the same time, it's a crazy story. It's all starting to pick up, right? Like I'm listening to these things when I'm like driving, when I'm doing dishes, laundry, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like so sick of the COVID era because like I'm in this place where I don't know anybody. When I went home for the holidays, everything's arm's length. No one's like coming around to talk. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to Miami Music Week. It's canceled. So it's all in these like warehouses and all this different stuff. And like, of course, shout out Jason again, my fucking best friend, dude. He was down to go with me. He had already had COVID. He had already had COVID. So he was
all day.
That's my guy right there, baby. But like, he already had it. So he was a little less worried about it too. But my mindset was like, fuck it. I'm going and I hope I get COVID because then I'm good. Like then I'm on the other side of it, right? And thank God I went on that trip because I end up sitting next to this guy on the plane, right? This guy's like clearly just like buttoned up. The guy's dialed, very smart dude. And I could tell that he's like sitting there like listening to a podcast, reading on a tablet a little bit, and we get into conversation. And he actually was an electronical engineer, worked for Oracle, Apple, Red Hat, and Google in his life. Like the big dogs, bro. And he was on his way to Miami so he could catch a connecting flight to go to Costa Rica so he could work remotely from Costa Rica because he's just a baller. And he was like, yo, all these companies I worked for, all these different experiences I've had in my life, if I can give you one piece of advice that would be the biggest thing for you moving forward, and it's the biggest thing for me in my life, is to occupy your subconscious mind when you're doing things you don't want to do. And I was like, hold on, like, I feel like I'm kind of starting to do that a little bit, but like elaborate. So at the time, like Bitcoin was like the big thing. So he's like, let's say you don't know anything about Bitcoin. Listen to a podcast about Bitcoin next time you're like doing the dishes, doing your laundry. And I guarantee you that your subconscious mind will be occupied by that, right? Because your conscious mind is like, I'm folding laundry, whatever. But your subconscious mind is still listening to this podcast about Bitcoin in the background. And he was like, that will then translate the next time you have a conversation with somebody. All of a sudden you'll have this like Bitcoin knowledge. You're like, how did that get there? And I realized, I was like, that is happening for me in real time. Like I'm starting to put that into practice, and it makes a lot of sense because that's when your mind runs, right? That's when you get this negative feedback loop. And then your mind's funny because it runs this like repetition loop, and it's not that creative. Like it's the same thing over and over. Like, oh, you had this tough time when you were a senior in high school, and you know, this person said like, oh, like I had somebody one time, I was going to check out a college in Colorado, and they told me that they hoped that my plane crashed and I didn't come back. So heavy, but like that one little thing will replay over and over instead of like something new, or like I got past that. Like that was 12 years ago. Like, why is my mind still bringing that up? So then when you occupy that subconscious space that's gonna be like repetitive and say that same thing to you, it's not there because you can't have that much going on. I'm folding laundry. I'm listening to this podcast about Bitcoin. That shit's gone. Like I'm not hearing that anymore. And so that literally was like this like pivotal moment for me. And going back into like the, you know, repetition and snowballing of things, I picked up on this idea of like affirmation. And I think that's a little woo-woo for some people. But I think as I continue to do it, and I have these ones that I say every day, like I noticed it in real time, and I noticed things going negatively, but kept my faith in it the whole time. Like I have this one where it's like, Today, I'm so happy and so thankful that I'm healthy and safe. I'm so happy and so thankful that my friends, family, and loved ones are healthy and safe. Today, I'm so happy and so thankful that I have abundance in my life. I'm so happy and so thankful that I have multiple streams of revenue and that I love all my jobs every day. And in that time, I end up losing one of the jobs. So now I'm like, all right, like I'm doing these affirmations, like I don't really know if it's like working or whatever. And then all of a sudden, before my paycheck was even done from the last job and those 2 weeks were up, I got hired for another job. And then it was like the last one was like, I'm so happy and so thankful that I believe in myself. And I'm so happy and so thankful that I have no doubt that God will lead me to where I'm meant to be. So in that belief that in my faith, there's a divine plan for me and that I will end up where I'm supposed to be, I had no sweat about the other job. Like it was fine. It was gone. Get into this next job and it just didn't feel right, man. Like I just was still back into this like remote work job and it wasn't going well. Things are starting to unravel all different places, but I kept this faith, right? And the reason I bring that up is because like flash forward to now, I have multiple streams of revenue. I've got a brand that has a clothing line that sells that I'm making money on. I've got different opportunities within nightlife and stuff that we do. I've got a dream job working for Red Bull where I get to be on the other side of the bar now because I bartended for 10 years. Now I'm out and I'm expanding on those relationships. And relationships are the key, like I've said a couple of times now, to really lifting up your life. The more people that you're connected to, the more people that you have as a support system that you can talk with, the better your quality of life is going to be. And so it's like by trusting that, and then by creating a snowball effect of telling myself these things on a daily basis, like I manifested that shit in real time. Like this is my life now. Like I do have abundance. I do have multiple streams of revenue and I am happy and thankful for that. So like it really matters, man. Like the words that we speak matter. The things that you tell yourself, the things that you tell your friends. If you tell yourself every day, like, man, I'm not healthy, like you're going to end up getting sick. If you tell yourself that you're an indestructible force and that you literally cannot be penetrated. I never got COVID once, dog. I went to Miami Music Week in the heat of the fucking pandemic. And I went into warehouse raves and all this stuff. I was flying on airplanes. I never got COVID once because I believed that I was healthy and safe and that my friends, family, and loved ones were healthy and safe.
I'll tell you what. Again, so many good points within there. The affirmations that you just talked about. Somebody that I know you like because I see you post a lot of his stuff, Kobe Bryant. I mean, what a legend he was and still is to this day, even though he passed. There's something that he would always talk about, and I mentioned this on the podcast with Eric Nolan, the MMA fighter, who is just that kid. After talking to him, and I had known his energy, I talked to him a little bit, but after talking to him on that podcast, I mean, that kid is so dialed in and has such a good mind on him. He's just real, you know?
Yeah.
And
no, he's such a good kid. I've met him a few times.
There's no question why he's had the success he's had so far and why he's going to continue to have success. But on that podcast, when we were talking, I mentioned the Kobe Bryant effect, where he talks about these little victories and all the work you put in every day. It starts to compound, right? Yeah. So if you wake up earlier than everybody else, you get a workout in. Then you're eating when they come down to eat their first meal of the day before they go for their first workout. You're already ahead of the game because now you're going to go work out with them again, and then you're going to get a third workout in. So in the time that the day that they've done 1 to 2 workouts, you've done 2 to 3. And those little victories continue to build up over time and end up propelling you past everybody who was not doing that work. The affirmations I find are very similar. And
100%.
Telling yourself those things and visualizing. And again, like you said, it's kind of woo-woo. Like people may not think it's something that works. But once you start to do it, once you start to try something like that, you start to see or experience or feel a shift in energy. And 100%. It starts to build on every single day. Yesterday's affirmations, they build on the next day and the next day and the next day. And it keeps building one by one. And then eventually, you've kind of manifested this life that you've wanted to get to or that you've wanted to experience for a while. Like you just said, now all of a sudden, all the pieces come together, right? And if you continue to have those little victories and continue to do the little things every day, consistency, because again, along this whole conversation, there's that thing, that concept of motivation versus just being consistent. Like when you're motivated, you're ready to go. Everybody can do everything when they're motivated. If you're motivated to go to the gym, you're motivated to do something, you're motivated to make money, you're going to do it. What happens when you lose that motivation? What happens when you're down? What happens when things aren't going your way and you lose that motivation? It's the consistency, it's the diligence, it's the work you're putting in every day. Those things, if you can keep those consistent every day, that's going to propel you. And then when you get to a point where you're low, you're going to keep doing it. And then it's going to bring you back to where you want to be. And it's going to put you into a spot where you were thinking you were going to go. Going back to that concept where you said, I had this idea that everything was going to work out, right? I relate to that a lot. I think a lot of people know my energy. It's pretty positive. It's high. I've always
Absolutely
had this
electric.
absolute pure lightning, the walking human form of pure lightning. But really, I've had this belief. And I don't think everybody has this, which is important to say, but I've always had a belief that things are going to work out. If you're living right, if you're doing what you believe is right, you're living good, you're treating people with respect, you're doing right by others, and you're living the way that you think you should be in terms of going through life the correct way and being good to people, I always had this feeling that things would work out. And when you get to a point where things are not going well, it gets tough to remember that belief. And 100%. I've gone through that myself. I've gone through times where I've just been feeling anxious and having all this anxiety. And then I don't know if I've ever really experienced depression myself. I've seen it firsthand with one of my best friends and how it affected his life. But I've gone through so much anxiety and questioning of why. And I had to remind myself, listen, there's always that belief that things are going to work out, and it goes back to the affirmation. If I can continue to remind myself and talk to myself about that and just put it out there, then I'm going to continue to carry that mindset with me through the subconscious all the way through those dark times. And then when it does work out, I'm like, okay, we made it, and here we are. Then there comes the point where you have to remember, you know what? At some point, it's probably going to go back down, which is why I have to continue doing what I was doing through the good and the bad times right now, and at all times, because there's almost like this parallel line of happiness, right? When you're brought into this world, and there's a time from when you're brought into this world to when you leave this world, right? There's this line of happiness that kind of runs parallel or almost on top of that time. And you go through life and you go through these ups and downs that kind of surpass. They go above the line, they go below the line, right?
Ebbs and flows.
Ebbs and flows. And if you attach your happiness to the things that are bringing you above that line or bringing you below that line, then your happiness is always going to be at whatever it is going on at that moment. So let's say you take Reds, for instance, right? I worked so hard to bring Reds to a successful point. It finally gets to that point. It's crazy. It's the hottest spot in New Jersey. Everybody wants to be there. It's insane. I'm meeting all these people. We're having a great time, right? If my happiness is attached to that, to what Reds was and the success of Reds, then I'm going to be riding that high for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, what happens when it doesn't work out? Because that actually did happen. We had to close Reds. I had to close that spot that I worked so hard for, that I experienced so much success in. It's over. It's done. So now I was riding that high above that line. If I ride that low down here, then my happiness attached to that and the outcome and those things, it's going to bring me below that line, and that's where I'm going to be. Doing those affirmations, talking about those things, talking to somebody else and having someone to go to, just those little things, those things that you can do consistently every day, whether you're above or below, what that's going to do over time is allow you to stay on that line of happiness, right? And it's not always going to, again, there's a scale on that line, right?
Oh, yeah.
1 to 10.
1
That's
to
what's
10.
included, right? The happiness review. But not attaching yourself to what people may deem as successful in this life or what you may think is success will allow you to stay more in the moment, I think. And once Reds closed, I went through, questioning again, why did this happen? I put so much work in, and there's obviously a reason for that. We can go into it, but getting back to that point, I think if people can realize doing the little things in life will help keep you on that line as much as possible, that's where I think the happiness lies.
Oh, 100%, man. And it's interesting because, dude, I knew we were going to be boys, and, you are just hitting on all of the things that I like. And I wholeheartedly believe that, happiness is a choice at the end of the day, right? If you're going to snowball towards the negativity, then you're going to have a negative impact in your life. But if you're going to snowball the positivity, if you're going to work on some of these things that could be woo-woo, but they actually work, like affirmations, it's going to snowball towards a positive outlook, right? And I think that one of the things I picked up on that you kind of have that we're just very similar on is being delusionally optimistic. I just believe that it's going to work out no matter what. And that's because in my mind, it is. There's no doubt about it. Like eventually everything is going to align again. And I think like you were kind of saying there where it's like, it matters for you to align your actions with your intentions. If your intentions are to do these great things, but then, you know, your actions are like, oh, like, you know, you don't treat people right. You don't like hold the door open for somebody. You don't do the little things, then you're not going to get to where you're intending to be. And I think it, you know, fully flows back into like everything that you were saying there, like going back into what kind of got me started into the book was like, okay, so now I've got this information. It's making sense to me. I'm listening to audiobooks and different stuff. I came across the book Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is all about tiny incremental habit changes that over time create this atomic explosion of a habit. And that's the idea that I want with the book, right? 66 chapters. So 2 journal questions and a happiness review. At the end of 66 days of reading this book, you've created 3 healthy habits. You're reading a chapter of a book, you're writing in a journal, and you're doing a happiness review. And one of the big points that they touch on in that book is like the way that they go about it for somebody who's like massively overweight, right? The first day that they go to the gym, they have them go for 2 minutes. The second day, they have them go for 2 minutes. And they're creating this habit of showing up to the gym. Eventually, you go in for 2 minutes and you're like, well, I just drove here 30 minutes. Am I just going to leave? Nah, I'm going to go get on this elliptical. I'm going to ride for a little bit. I'm going to do something else. And over time, what you've done is you've created a habit of showing up to the gym. And it's so important to just show up. Like, pick that thing that's hard to you and go for it. Like that thing that you're thinking about, like, I did it recently. I started taking some boxing classes. I always wanted to. I was always like enamored with like boxing. It's not because I want to knock somebody out. I'm not a fighter. I'm not like that. I just like it. I genuinely thought it would be cool to learn. And so one day I just literally got in the car, drove to a boxing gym and signed up. If I didn't just show up, if I didn't just go for it, I never would have done it and I never would have been there. And so I think it's like, you got to do those kind of things in your life and you got to like incrementally get there. Like I didn't just walk in and sign up for a fight with somebody. Like I basically jumped roped and shadow boxed in the mirror for the first like 3 or 4 days of it. And I was like, am I ever going to punch anything? Like, you know, but no, the point is to build that habit, to build that muscle memory before you even get to the point. Like everybody always just like looks at the end goal and then they either write it off or they think it's too big. And it's like, nah, the greatest way to lose sight of the bigger picture is to focus on the here and now. If you just get caught up in everything that's happening right now, you're going to lose sight of the bigger picture in your life. And you just got to keep that in mind. And I think that that's where we connect. And I love one more thing that you brought up there, the Kobe situation, right? Love Kobe. Kobe's a huge inspiration of mine. I don't know if you know, a lot of people don't, but after Kobe's basketball career, he was starting to elevate even more. He was getting into all different kinds of business and he started writing children's books. And this one quote that really stood out to me when I was starting to write the book is that stories move the world. So if you want to do something that's going to change the world, start with stories. And that was like huge for me because I was like, man, like I love Kobe. I'm never going to be the Mamba on the court. I'm not a basketball guy like that. I can shoot, but I'm not Kobe, you know? But I can tell stories. I don't know if you picked up on that, but I like to tell stories, you know? And so like, it happens, right? You know, it's like, it's part of who I am because I like to make people feel good. I think we talked about this the other day, right? It's a Maya Angelou quote, right? But like, people won't remember what you said. They won't remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think one of the best ways for me to do that is to tell a story, to get somebody going and excited and talk about this time where this was going on and then tie it back to their life, how it makes sense for them. And I think it's important to do those kind of things. Like motivation, you said it before, like it's not always going to be there. Motivation is fleeting. So you got to come up with something that's going to light you up, that's going to illuminate you in your life. So that's where like, I love your Goggins stuff, you know, like where you're like, because you created something that's going to be there for you. You know, you don't have to run 100 miles on 2 broken feet to have that level of like motivation and get you fired up like that.
Yeah. And let me tell you something about this whole story, the thing you just went into about the stories. I believe so heavily in that. And that's why I really love doing the podcast because everybody's got a story. I say it all the time. And, you know, it's interesting because when you talk to people about podcasts, especially now, everybody's like, oh, who are you going to have as a guest? Who are you going to have? Who are you going to have? And it's all, but when people ask that question, it's almost like they're asking based on somebody that everybody knows. You know, they're like, oh, is it going to be somebody famous, this and that? And the one thing I want to focus on, especially I talk about it all the time, is I love doing the podcast with my friends. I love doing the podcast with people that are moving towards something or trying to build something special. That doesn't have to be somebody famous. It's not about what people have accomplished. And you made that point within that, what you just said, that what you were just talking about. You know, people are looking at the here and now. They're not looking at what can be, what was. And of course, it's all a balance, right? The law of equivalent exchange, everything. You have to be able to balance it. You can't look too far into the future. You can't harp on what happened in the past. But so many people are focused on what's going on right here and right now, and they're missing what somebody could be, the potential of what somebody could be, the potential of where somebody might be going. And what I love about this podcast is that I'm talking to my friends, and I'm talking to a lot of people that I believe are going to be in such special places in the future. And I think, and it's not, they're not on the podcast because I think they're going to go there. They're on the podcast because they're my friend and because I believe in them. And that to me is something so special. And when you talk about everybody having a story, the person telling their story up to that point, the story cannot change up to that point. It has already happened. So they're telling what is happening or what has happened up to that moment. That story's there. Tell that story. And then what's going to be interesting is to look at where they go, where they end up, what they do, and then tell the story from that point on too. And looking at all those stories and seeing where people were, what they went through, all the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows that we were mentioning before, that is something that's going to be special. And I think I didn't even know about the Kobe thing with the stories, you saying that, but yeah, that's fucking sick.
Right? Because it goes like, it's like being the man in every arena, right? Like I think that was something that Michael Jordan was huge on. I forget exactly who was the first one who wrote that. I don't know if you know, but somebody wrote that speech about the man in the arena. And you got to do that in all the different aspects of your life, right? And you're 100% right. Every single person does have a story. And honestly, I'm going to take the shades off for this one and look right in the camera. But every single person in this world is beautifully and uniquely an individual. And you have something. So don't ever act like you don't. Like, don't let anybody tell you that you don't. There's 7.5 billion people in this world. If you're going to let the opinion of 1 or even 100 or even 1,000 people stop you from doing the thing that makes you beautifully and uniquely you, then that is terrible compared to the odds, right? If there's 7.5 billion people in this world and someone says that you're not for them or you're too much for them, like, you got to move on to the next person. You got to go somewhere else in your life because those people aren't the right people for you. And there's going to be somebody out there. Your energy is going to be reciprocated. And that's genuinely where I believe that, like, my new relationships in my life, the different things that I've got going on, all come together from this, like, reciprocated positive energy.
Yes, you have to be you. That's such a good point because that energy of you being, this is why when I say people putting on a show, right? People putting on a show and acting like somebody they're not, it's going to attract the wrong people into their life. So if you're allowing people to change the way you act, change the way you do things because you think you should be somewhere else or you think you should be doing what they deem as successful or where they say you should be, then it's only going to put you in a position where you don't want to be in the end. You have to be true to yourself because that's going to, think about the 4 people that are in this room right now. Like, if we had all not been ourselves, if we had not been putting out the energy that we were putting out, we all wouldn't be here right now. But you have to, and another thing I want to say is we talk about, you know, the affirmations and doing all these things and stuff like that. It's not easy. You said that before. It's hard. It's hard when you're going through stuff, and it's hard to stay consistent and diligent when you are going on, you know, on the down spot. But if you continue to do that and understand that, you know, there's a lot of good people out there doing those things and then getting to a spot where you're going to put the energy that you want to see in the world out is going to bring all the people who have that energy to you. And I think that's how we all ended up in this room right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you kind of mentioned it before with your buddy. Like, I actually got into this situation where I was like, all right, do one new hard thing per week, right? I ended up picking up yoga. And one of the things that I learned in yoga, by the way, incredibly humbling, dude. I thought I was going to, like, I'm an athlete. I'm good to go. I'm going to kill this. I go into this class. First off, I'm the only guy in the room. It's hot yoga, so the room is hot as hell. And there are all these incredible girls that are absolutely killing it, like standing on one hand. One girl's like standing on her head. And I'm like, I can barely touch my toes right now. Like, I don't even know what's going on. But there's so many pieces of that practice that come out, right? And one of the things that they say is like, you're okay. You've been here before. I think I always go back to that moment where it's like, I like to go in the sauna, right? So I'm like doing some breath work. I'm sitting in the sauna and, you know, you start feeling a little lightheaded or something. And I remind myself, like, you're okay. You've been here before. You've felt this before. You're going to get through it. Just last another minute and you're good. And it's the same kind of idea where it's like, you know, another piece of yoga that they touched on is like falling out is human. Getting back in is being a yogi. And like, I only took 15 classes, and that stood out to the point that like I'm bringing it up right now. And I think like you were kind of saying, you know, it's like it's hard to do these things and you might fall off. You might lose your practice for a minute. But getting back in is that moment that makes you a fucking legend. Like, don't worry about it. If you fall off from going to the gym for a week or two, like, so what? Go back to the gym. Show up again. Start the process again. Create the habit. Because falling out is human. We're not perfect. I think one of the biggest things too is like, you know, we were saying everybody shows on social media like their highlight reel and how everything's the greatest, but like people don't want that all the time. People don't want perfect. People want human. They want to see what's real. And that was where like I started putting out these videos and I started getting like a big reaction. So I started doing happiness reviews with people. And one of the biggest things that I realized when they were giving their score, and the reason that it would be not a 10 is because there was things that were chipping away at their inner peace, right? So it was like, oh, you know, like things are not going exactly how I wanted it at work, or I'm not, you know, seeing my girlfriend on a regular basis because we're in this long distance relationship. It was always something that was chipping away at their happiness, right? And I think, you know, you have to tap into those certain things to realize what even makes you tick. And that's where it's so important to me to like record this, right? Because it's like, okay, now I'm going down that path. Now I'm starting to have, you know, a lower score. I can go back and look and see like, hey, what did I do that day that I had a 9.5? Oh, I went to the gym. I took a yoga class. I talked on the phone with my friend for an hour. I did some things professionally that were really good. You know, I got good feedback from my boss that day. Whatever it is, like you have this ability to go back to it. And so it's like, you know, we were saying everybody's different. Everybody has a different story. And that's why I love asking this question, like, what is your definition of happiness? Because nobody has the same answer to that. Happiness looks different for every single person in the world. So it's like, what is your definition? For me personally, I can tell you what it is, but I don't know what yours is, Red. For me personally, I think it goes right back into what we were saying. Again, why I feel like we're just instantly connected as homies like this. But like for me, it's being your true authentic self, no matter who your audience is. So whether I'm talking to my mom, my boss, my new girlfriend, or my best friend, I want to be that same person, because when I'm not being that person, when I'm wearing that mask, it's chipping away at my inner peace. I'm not being who I want to be. And that's one of the things I think is scary with the highlight reel of social media, is that you're constantly trying to like achieve this like higher level of perfect human, but humans aren't perfect. They're human.
That's so true. And let me tell you something about, you mentioned showing up in that story. I think the most important thing I've learned through everything is that you have to show up. And going back to this battle in your mind, right? You mentioned something in that story about how you're going through things. I think it's so important for people to do things alone sometimes. Yeah. And I'll expand on that. But one of the things I talked about in that Nolan podcast too is I remember going, like, you know how when you go to the gym, everybody's around you and stuff like that, and you're why I like your happiness review and that whole book and everything that you're putting into it and what you were doing is because you're focusing on what is actually going on in you. Like, it's your emotion. It's what you're going through at that moment. And I think what a lot of people do is they take all the outside things and they tend to surround themselves with people all the time and this certain energy. But when you start to do things on your own, alone, and you start to reflect and think about those things, it helps you channel your emotions and it helps you focus those emotions into doing something productive. So we talked about doing those affirmations and things like that and how it's hard when you're feeling down. But one thing I learned, when Reds closed, I remember being so angry because, obviously with the pandemic, we basically never had a chance, right? And we had so much success there, but it was like we just faced so much backlog from the pandemic. And I remember being so angry. I remember being so mad. I've never felt that in my life. I'm always, like I said, my energy positive. I'm radiating positivity. I'm trying to give people that energy and help them feel it as well and experience that. And I remember I was so angry inside, and I would go to the gym. And when I go to the gym, I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. But the reality is sometimes you are going to be angry. Sometimes you are going to be sad. And I would go by myself. This is when, I'm on the bar life schedule. I'd be going at like 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Like no one else is in there. It's just me. And that was just because that was the way my schedule worked out. But what I learned through that is like lifting and doing something through those emotions allowed me to channel it. And I remember taking all that anger, and these workouts were so intense, and I was putting up these crazy numbers, and I was just elevating myself in the gym to a level that I've never reached before. And it was because I didn't allow that anger to distract me. I didn't allow that anger to, push me off the path of not going to the gym, not doing the things I wanted to do. Instead, I embraced it. Yeah. And you talked about embracing your emotion earlier, and I think going back to what we talked about earlier in the podcast, people are almost afraid to embrace those emotions. They sweep them under the rug, just like you said before. And that will never get you to where you want to go. It'll never help you get past it. But if you learn, and this is the point I'm making, is that if you spend time alone and you spend time in reflection, whatever the way that is, right? You were doing the happiness reviews in the book. I was in the gym all by myself, focusing and trying to put that anger to use. And through that, I was reflecting while I was in the gym, doing this all alone with no one around, no one to talk to, and just kind of reflecting on those emotions. So then when I do talk to somebody about it, when we get on the podcast and we're talking about this, I can talk about it, and I can talk to somebody about it who can also reciprocate that energy, hear it, listen, and then tell me part of their story, which is what we've been doing this whole time, is going back and forth and talking about the things that we've learned through all that. And if there's one thing I try to encourage people to do, it's to do some of those things alone and do some of that reflection, the gym, affirmations, whatever it is, because that is going to help you channel. Because guess what? There's going to be a different emotion down the line. It's not going to be anger. Maybe you're sad. Maybe you lose somebody and you're just feeling so down about it. But if you learn to channel your emotions, then when you get to that point, everything you did prior to that helped you channel that certain emotion at that time will help you now channel this new emotion at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, a lot of times in the mental health space, the psychology space, like they call it the inner work, right? And what you were really doing was you were doing the inner work, right? At the end of the day, that nasty mess, that pile under the rug that's built up, it's only going to get better if you go in and clean it, right? So you were able to go back in there, clean up this nasty mess that was brewing up inside of you and that you were dealing with, and you did it in a way that worked for you. You found something and you found a place where you can positively channel that energy, and then you were able to get it off and get past it. And then once you clean up the mess that's under the rug, it's not there anymore. It's not this nasty mess. And the work is something that will be part of your life forever. Like you're always going to have to do that work, right? And that's where it became so important for me to do those hard things and challenge myself in those places, because you get a choice. Like going to the gym is hard. Not going to the gym is even harder, because then your body starts shutting down. These things are important for us. They're healthy. So even though it's going to be hard to face that trauma that you went through, to face that moment that's just sitting in the back of your mind, it's going to be even harder to not face it and just let it sit forever. If it's something that happened when you're 8 years old, you're still going to remember that when you're 78 years old. It doesn't matter. So you have to go in, you have to clean that up. You got to find a way that works for you. And I think, you were kind of saying there, doing something by yourself, right? And I find a lot of motivation in a lot of different places. One place that I find it is through this guy, Lewis Howes. He has a podcast, The School of Greatness. It's awesome. He's got this concept about treating yourself like somebody that you're madly in love with. And I don't think we do that kind of stuff enough, right? You were kind of saying, if you would have tied all of your happiness into Reds, right? And you would have been stuck on that, when it crumbled, you would have crumbled with it. And I think it's relatable to all things in life. It relates back to relationships. A lot of times people just get so invested into the person, their significant other, whoever it is, their partner, right? That when that ends up crumbling, you lose everything. And that's really like not a good foundation to start a relationship on. If you're going to start a relationship, you have to be in a place where like you're happy with yourself and you've done the inner work, and so did the other person. The other person is also happy in their own right. And then you bring that together and you share it. And that's really the way to like have a healthier relationship that is going to blossom and flourish. And I think that a lot of times it gets like kind of slept on. Like, do those things for yourself. Like, do the stuff that's going to make you happy, and then maintain that and share those things with somebody else.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's interesting is that people attaching themselves to these outside things, like you were just saying. What if you attach it to a relationship? What if you attach it to these outside things? What if I attach my happiness to just how Reds was doing, right? Of course, when Reds is doing good, I'm going to feel happy, and then when it doesn't do good, you're not going to feel as great. But I think what people don't realize is life changes, and attaching yourself to what's going on in the present moment and how well it's going at that moment and what's going on, say it's a relationship and your relationship's good. If you attach yourself just to that and your happiness just to that, it goes back to that line I was talking about. It puts you above, then it's going to bring you down. But you want to be on that line as much as possible, that straight line where you can focus and you could do things. But when life changes, I think that's when people start to go through things like this. And this is where, you know, again, going back to my energy and the positive, my whole life was like that. And I experienced more anxiety later in life, which I think most people do.
Yeah.
But I saw firsthand what depression could do to somebody. And I think something I learned is that when somebody's really going through something that's bringing them down, it changes who they are. And when their circumstances change, that almost changes them as well. And I just remember almost not even recognizing the person that was going through all this. And that was the first time that I've ever seen this in my life, was talking to somebody that I had known so well, so close, and then talking to them in the future, and it was like I was talking to a completely different person. And I have never experienced that in my life. And I was like, what is going on? And this is why I really believe in this movement, and I believe in the Happiness Review and what you're doing, because I think that person, they didn't have anybody. They didn't have anybody to talk to, and they were going through this alone the entire time. And like I said, I think you should go through emotions alone and learn to channel them. But there always comes that point where you're ready to talk to somebody and you want to talk to somebody. And when you don't have that person, you don't have that outlet, whatever it may be, you're stuck in that mindset the entire time. And I just remember I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And going through that, thankfully, this person is now kind of on the other side of it,
Yeah.
And it's cool. And it doesn't mean it's not going to come back. We've been saying that this whole time. But right now, for a long period of time, they've been kind of on the other side of it. And it's just it's crazy to think that when they were going through that, it was a completely different person. And I don't know, when you were going through that in North Carolina, right, where this whole story started, did you feel like you were a completely different person?
Honestly, yeah. I really knew that I was changing a lot. Like, I knew that things were starting to matter less and matter more. Stuff that I was really focused on was starting to change. Like, I was starting to get way more emotionally moved by things too. Cause I think, at the time there was different kind of turmoil in my life and different stuff going on. But like, man, like I was finding even little videos of dogs, coming home and the owner getting all excited. Even that was getting me choked up and stuff like that. And it's just cause I was starting to change. I was becoming way more connected to how I'm actually feeling rather than just kind of pushing that off onto everyone around me. And now I'm aware of the fact that I do carry that energy. People do reciprocate whatever my energy is. I just have that presence in life, and not even trying to sound maybe cocky or anything like that. It's just something that I know that happens. So if I know that hey, if I show up happy, it's going to make other people happy. Or if I show up negative, or if I speak negatively and say a work meeting, it's going to make everybody else on the team start kind of reciprocating some of that. And yeah, I think, it's crazy how often we kind of push off things like change, right? And we resist it. But change is the only guaranteed thing in life, right? And as you do different kinds of things and as you change and grow and things go on in your life, that's what you're supposed to do. We're supposed to grow. We're getting older, things change in your body, the way that you function changes. It's just the inevitable part of life, right? And I actually got told this one time, and I hated it at the time because it was like in the job where I just really didn't like it. But they said, when you're green, you grow, and when you're ripe, you rot. And now I love that. I say it all the time because like a plant that's growing or a vegetable that's growing, when it's green, it's still got all this room to grow and anything could happen. But when it's ripe, like there's nothing left, right? Like the only left thing to do is to rot. And that's so true for life. Like if you think you know everything, if you think, oh, that's never going to work for me, affirmations, that's woo woo, I can't do that, that's never going to work for me, like then you're right. Because you're ripe there. Like the only thing you got left to do is just rot on that. But if you're green, if you're open to it, if you're willing to learn and try something new, because hey, guess what? Change is the only constant in this world. You're gonna have an opportunity to grow.
Damn, dude, that's serious. You got a lot of serious like things up in your mind that you've been. That subconscious thing you said before, and that concept right there.
160,000 thoughts a day, dude, dog.
It's and you know what though? You're right. I think, you know what else, though, too? I think a lot of people are afraid to be as open, what you're saying. They're afraid to be green because I think they have kind of like an ego about them and things like that. And that's why I think it's important for this type of movement and for people to talk about these things is because just the most, and we've done so much explanation of all these things and we've dived in, we dove into it and again, I'm not even sure if I explained it all correctly, but the one thing is that if you're open to doing those things, and if you have something like the happiness review where you're putting it on the front line that it's okay to talk about these things and be open about it, I think that's going to take a lot of people and turn them from being ripe to turn them back to being green. And that's going to open the conversation. And I think when you open the conversation, when you open your mind and just are open to the idea of change or different ways to do things, that's when you start to make progress. And I've seen that in my life too. I wasn't always so open-minded. I never been wrong in my life. I said it all the time. You know what I mean? Never been wrong. But as I've grown in life and things have gone on, I've started to open my mind and stop being so close-minded about things and start to just hear other people's perspectives. And when you listen to people and you hear what they've been through, it goes back to the stories. That will open your mind and it will give you something to reflect on. And you hear somebody say something and you go, that's something I thought that person would never say. That's something I thought that person might have never gone through. And that's why I think it's important for people to tell their story and it's important for people to let people know what they're going through. Because I think a lot of people are going through the same things. And I think a lot of people are afraid to be green. I think they just got it all figured out and they're like, no, that won't work. But if you just give it a chance, that's where the progress is going to come.
Absolutely. And like, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't also get into my head with things sometimes too, right? Like, I mean, you just kind of got to it. Like, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that through a lot of the work that I've done, like I do have like a lot of deeper concepts on things. And then sometimes I've kind of been like, oh man, like one is how is this going to be perceived? And two, like, is it kind of intimidating to some people, right? Where it's like, oh, like that guy's just like Mr. Mental Health and all this stuff. And like, sometimes then like someone would see me doing something like going out to the bars and partying and they're like, oh, like, is that like mental health based? And I kind of want to like switch gears into that part too, because like it relates back to the whole concept of like the dirty little sauna, right? Where it's this like thing that you would never expect. Like I found meditation, prayer, my faith, I found myself in this dirty little sauna. Whereas like you would picture like a monk in a monastery doing all these kind of things. Like just because I sit Indian style doesn't mean that I have to be in this monastery, right? Like that's a big part of my point with everything. And I think it'll come like a lot more clear as like the book comes out and things like that. But like, it's about what works for you, right? Like, that's why I love the concept and always like tying it into like brushing your teeth. But like, you don't brush your teeth the same way I do. And I'm never going to be like, Red, you don't brush your teeth right. Like, it's just something that you do. Like, you just got to do what works for you. You know what I mean? And like, I think that so many people are just quick to like judge or write something off. But it's like, no, that's just how it works for this person. And I don't think that anything specifically, as long as you're not like, as long as you're like within a moral compass, right? Like, obviously there's things that are unacceptable and like, societally, like not going to push that. But like, there's nothing wrong. You can be in touch with your mental health. You can meditate. You can have faith. And you can also go to DJs. You can do it.
Fucking men, dog. Fucking men.
I wanted to switch the vibe up a little bit because something was just a little off. And I think it's my shoes, man. I gotta switch into.
Wait a second. What do we got going on here?
I gotta put the.
Wait
dunks on,
a second.
I gotta get
There's
the
no
dunks
way right now. Wait a
Come
second.
on.
No, dude. Come on
Gotta
now.
throw the dunks
We're
on,
throwing
bro.
the dunks on mid-podcast?
Mid-pod.
What? Yo, look how hype Keith's got when he pulled out the box of dunks, dog. Let's go.
Let's go.
That's unbelievable right now. Damn, those are fire, too. Black and yellow.
Black and yellow, baby. Had to pop that on.
Damn.
I just feel like we needed to switch gears a little bit,
That's
right?
absolutely fucking electric.
Let's
that
go.
just juiced me up, dog.
Let's go.
So listen, that's a good point you made, because you've told me this point before about how it's not, it's the balance, right? It's like you can fucking do all these affirmations, you can do all these things and focus on that. You can also go out and party with your friends.
Yeah.
You can also go out and hang out with people, and you can do different things. And it's true. I think people from the outside looking in might be like, oh, well, he's the mental health guy. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? It's because that's what life is. It's all different things. It's not just one straight path. It's the same thing we've been talking about with all the concepts we've talked about so far. We might go to DJ's right now after this podcast.
I think we are going to go to JJ's right now. It's Italian night.
Dude,
we might have to.
I'm just, when we talk about shit like this and really get deep and stuff, I get so fired up, and that actually like propels my energy into wanting to go do something and go out and rock Italian night, which is the craziest night at DJ's.
Craziest night. But like, dude, I apply this stuff to everything. Like, I'm not just saying this stuff just because we're sitting on a podcast. Like, I believe in it. Like, I kind of cracked the code to myself of like what a hangover is. For me, the reason I actually like to go out is because I love the interactions with people. I talk to everyone. I don't know, like my friends, like when we used to go out all the time, they would be like, dude, where were you tonight? I know Jason said it to me all the time. Like, dude, where were you?
I was literally asking this question the other night when I was like, where was Luke?
Where was Luke? Luke was talking to everybody. He was having moments with every person that he ran into, because that's what I like to do, man. I like to make people feel good. I like to talk to them. I like to run around. That's what I like about going out. And where it kind of comes full circle with the hangover thing for me is like, I had such a good time last night that it's only right, and the equal and opposite reaction is that I'm going to feel like shit the next day. But like, I'm accepting that sometimes. Like, yo, I'm going out tonight. I'm going to have one of the best nights of the summer tonight, Italian night at DJ's, and I might feel like shit tomorrow. But that's an ebb and flow too. And I apply it to everything. It's not always just this like ultimately serious thing. And that's why I wanted to kind of just like unbutton the tie a little bit and like actually get real on that side of things too. Like, there is no limit to these things. Like, you can always go back in life. You can reinvent yourself. You can move to North Carolina because you're in love with this girl. You can leave all your friends and family, and you can come back. And as long as you trust that everything's going to work out like we've been talking about, like, your life comes back around, man. That shit was hard. That shit sucked. I don't even like to get into like the full details of it that much, because like, I got a lot of respect for her. There's nothing, nothing truly bad happened. I've had relationships in the past where like cheating happened or like this or that, but like nothing like that really happened. It was just, we both agreed that like I changed and so did you, and we grew apart. And that is just part of growing in life. And I think like, people right away were like, who did what happened, all this stuff. And you jump to all these conclusions. Like, no, like there are so many different ways that it can go. And it doesn't have to always be this final thing. Like, I can be focused on promoting mental health for people, and I could also have a good time with my friends. Whether you think that those two are related or not, it's really apples to oranges.
100%, and that's on them. And it goes back to what you were saying before about how like the outside forces and people saying this and that. You know what? I say it all the time. Fuck them. Fuck them all, dog. That's like my 2023. Fuck them. Like, it's so funny because I'll say that about people I love. Like, and it going back, it's like you go to DJs, you could also talk about mental health. You could be both. Fuck them. I love them too, because people aren't always, I threaded this the other day. I won't even say tweet it. I threaded it the other day because now we're on threads. I said, people aren't always going to see where you're trying to go. It's all good. Their vision is not the same as yours. Fuck them.
Fuck 'em.
That could have been one of your friends that you've known forever that you were talking to that was like trying to deter you from doing what you want to do or trying to deter you from going to where you want to go. Fuck them.
Fuck them.
That don't mean I don't love them still.
No.
It don't mean I don't love them still. Love them to death. But fuck them.
Fuck them. And I agree with you 100%. And it's because, like, bro, it's got to be what matters to you, right? So, like, we say it all the time, but, like, not everybody understands house music.
Not everyone understands
There's
house
definitely
music.
a lot of people who understand house music way more than me, but what matters is what that means to us.
Yes.
And that's why we say it. It's because not everybody understands this moment right now that we're having with house music. DJ Jason Keats ripping it in the DJ booth. It's all time. We're talking baseball. We're going 450 dead center. Like, we apply these things that illuminate the moment. Realistically, yeah, we're just hanging out. We're just vibing at the bar, but we pick it up to this other level. And I think that you can do that with anything in your life. Anything that matters to you, apply it to what works for you. So that could go back to meditation, prayer, affirmation. Like, do what works for you, bro. You don't have to say, I'm so happy and so thankful. Like, just do what works for you. Put these things into practice for yourself because it matters. It works. The things that you say and the words that you speak, I'm going back to that, but they matter, man. Because if you tell yourself it's not going to happen, then it's never going to happen. But if you tell yourself that it is going to happen, then you're going to achieve the things that you want to achieve. You just have to continue showing up.
Let's fucking go,
Juice
dog.
to the gills,
Listen,
dog.
It goes back to meaning, too. It's funny, you talk about us vibing in the booth and going crazy. Keith's in the background here going absolutely insane. But it's true. When we're all in the DJ booth and Keats drops DOD and it's the Let's Talk Baseball anthem and we're all it's so much in love. We're just, I mean, that to us, not everybody sees that meaning because they haven't experienced it. But to us, we feel in the moment what that song and what that moment means to us. And then we're not going to be able to see what something else means to somebody else. And that's what it is in your life. You ask me what my definition of happiness is. It's hard because I think there's a lot of different definitions of happiness for different circumstances and different things. But going after something that you believe in, working towards doing something that you believe in every single day, that to me is one of my definitions of happiness. Because I think, going back to what we just said, not everyone's going to see your vision, not everyone's going to see where you're trying to go, but you can see it. And if you're doing something every single day, if you're showing up every single day, it's one of the concepts we've talked about this entire time, showing up, the most important thing I've learned, showing up. If you show up to do that every single day, then not only will I think you get to what your definition of happiness is, I think you'll get to what your definition of success is as well. Because to me, that is success. To me, success is working towards what you want to do every day. And if you're doing that, I think you can achieve a lot of happiness and hit the higher part of that scale every single day.
100%. I love that answer. And I think it's a very powerful answer, to be honest with you. Like, there doesn't need to be one definition. Like, we spoke about it a million times now. Like, you grow, things change is inevitable. It's the only constant. Like, your definition of happiness doesn't have to be just one thing. It can change over time. It can grow and evolve with you. So I love that you said that, because it's like, yeah, things are going to go differently. Maybe in this moment right now, this is my definition of happiness. Maybe tomorrow it's different. Maybe a year from now it's different, but that's okay. And that's really my point with, like, pretty much everything is, like, give yourself grace for what's going on. Like, if you're having this hard time and you're fucking thinking about so many different kind of things, like, stop for a minute, give yourself grace in that situation. Like, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit, man. Like, we're lucky to even be here. We're lucky to live in America. We're lucky to live in the greatest state in the fucking union.
Let's fucking go.
You just got to take a moment and appreciate it sometimes and realize the little things. Like, man, like, us putting everything that we just said together, putting together this whole concept of, like, talking baseball while we're at the club, because we all love baseball. So it just connects and it becomes this thing that's bigger than what it actually was ever meant to be. And I think if you could just draw those correlations in your life, put together something that means a lot to you, then you're going to get to a place that you want to be. And that's, like, a huge part of my message with the happiness review. Like, seeing the new merch right here, be happy. Happiness is a choice, as I said. So, like, choose to be happy. If you could choose anything in this world, why not choose happy?
God damn, dog.
Oh.
You've been hitting them one-liners the entire episode, dude. Unbelievable.
You like when I look right in the camera,
Just
too?
absolutely right into the camera, let the people know. It's true, though. That's when you make those points, you have to look to the people. So before we kind of sign off and give our final thoughts, what's going on for you right now? What are the next steps in moving towards doing what you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, definitely was real excited to get started on here. Kind of just like tease some of the new merch. Got the Be Happy bucket hat. I got the Be Happy tie-dyes. It's actually, I don't know exactly when this is going to drop, but there's a good chance that by the time this drops, my 30th birthday has passed. I'm looking at my 30th birthday, August 9th. It's a Wednesday as the release date for some of these new summer clothes that I'm working on. And then from there, really just continuing to like build the content out. I think, sometimes, and hey, this is what we said earlier with the yoga thing. Like I fell off of the content a little bit because I got a new job and I really had to focus on getting myself acclimated to this new life and new climate and all of that. But now I'm dialed. I've got more of a situation where I could actually like afford to do the things that I want to do and create these videos and pay for a videographer and stuff. And so now it's time to just really continue forward, keep pushing forward, keep building the brand, keep spreading awareness, keep being happy. Really where I'm at right now with everything. And, I don't really rush the process. I actually went to this conference in Ohio and I met Gabby Bernstein. Gabby Bernstein's a big time, like 7 times over, New York Times bestselling author. And I asked her for some advice. I told her about the happiness review and everything. And she was like, be patient. Don't have to rush it. If you rush it, it's never going to happen. But if you trust, like we talked about, that the universe has a divine plan for you, these are her exact words, like it'll work out exactly when it's supposed to. So just be patient and have that faith.
Never rush, you forget things. Literally my number one rule of life, which I have repeatedly said on this podcast, and it's so true, the patience. Now, obviously, everybody knows pretty much in every aspect of my life, I don't rush. What do we start? 2 hours after we were supposed to start tonight. It's just the way, same with Keats. We did the same. But in terms of what you were just saying, the deeper meaning, everything will come in time. Yeah. If you're continuing to do the things, the little things every day, if you're showing up, like we said, all of that's going to build up over time. Those little victories are going to continue to build up over time. And eventually it's going to get you to where you want to go. You can't rush that, though. You just got to continue to show up every day. And eventually you're going to get where you want to go. And that's just, that point right there is something that I think could be solidified into, I live the actual never rush, you forget things in terms of everything I do, but it's such a true point.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like, why would you want to rush it? Like, if you're just jumping to the end goal, then you kind of miss out on everything that's the best part, which is the journey. Like, I love the idea of, like, falling in love with the journey and not the end goal because, like, you end up getting somewhere eventually, but you got to love those moments that build up to it. And if we rushed, if I was bothered that we started 2.5 hours late or whatever, we wouldn't have just absolutely ripped this electric fucking pod right here, spreading a bunch of awareness to people. And really, last thing I got to say, I hope that for anybody that watches this, you learn that, there's no one size fits all for happiness. I hope that you learn that, hey, I'm somebody that, definitely a larger male that you probably wouldn't expect to talk about these kind of things and actually like put yourself out there. But like you can. It doesn't matter. There's no one size fits all. It doesn't matter who tells you that you can't. If it feels right to you and it's within a good moral compass, I think you should go for it.
100%. Go for it and don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to go somewhere. And don't be afraid to also embrace those emotions yourself. Those things I think a lot of people are afraid to do. And again, just the last thing I'll say is we talked about so many different things. We went into a lot of detail. And I don't know if I really explained it as good as you explained your points because you really nailed that. You really hammered the nail. And it was amazing to listen and hear those things and all those concepts you talked about. But one thing I will say is the reason I believe in this movement so much and everything, the one thing I want people to take away from this episode is that it's okay to go talk to somebody. It's okay to embrace those emotions because everybody's going through that. Everybody has gone through something like that before. You're not alone. A lot of people are going through those things, and it's okay to reach out to somebody. And that's why this movement, the Happiness Review, is something that I really believe in.
100%. You just said that better than I did, dog.
I don't know.
No, I
look back on this episode, they ain't going to agree, but let's fucking go.
No, I think you did, man. I think it's important, right? Like, you need a support system, right? You need people around you that are going to listen to you, that they're going to hear you, that they're going to see you. Everybody needs that in their life, right? So find your support system, find whoever that might be for you, and go talk to them, right? Do the inner work yourself, and then when it gets too hard, find somebody to talk to, because at the end of the day, this is actually one concept. I got one more left. The longest study on happiness ever recorded is the Harvard Happiness Project. Over 75 years, they were studying different people who went to Harvard and what makes them happy, right? And you got to figure Harvard is an Ivy League school. These people are making big money. They're highly successful. None of that ever actually mattered. And I think it's another theme of the pod that we've been talking about. But the biggest thing in life that leads to happiness is your relationships. That is the Harvard Happiness Project. It has nothing to do with me. It's just a genuine fact that over time, it wasn't money, it wasn't success, it wasn't status. It was the quality of your relationships led to the happiest level of life.
Let's go. All-time podcast, dude.
All time, dog.
Thank you for coming on this podcast and being someone who people can go to, and being someone who's willing to talk about this, because I think that's so important. I'm so happy we finally lined it up. I think the energy kind of fit. This was the timing, as you mentioned, like just this week, everything that was coming around, like this was the time for us to do it. Thank you for coming on here. Thank you for what you're doing. This movement is something I truly believe in. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll continue to support it. It's something that I really am happy is being pushed, and that there's somebody out there who's doing it. Thank you for that. Thank you for telling your story on the Reddcast. With that, we're out.
We're out. Thank
Let's
you for having me.
All
Let's
day,
go.
Baby.